All right, everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. So it's Business Week, and we have Nicolette Leiby here today to talk to us about what to wear, and in some cases, what not to wear. Her presentation is wonderful. I think you're going to learn so much from this. Nicolette is from the Textile and Apparel Management program, and she comes from industry. She has a ton of experience. I can let her talk a little bit more about herself. But Nicolette, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get started with your presentation.
Okay, thanks, Julia. I am so excited to do this for you. It's definitely a topic near and dear to my heart. I do come from the industry. I was in the hard goods and soft goods industry for 30 years. I know I don't look that old, but yes. And I'm actually a TAM alum. I got my master's last spring. Both my children went here. What else? Oh, a full-time instructor, advisor. So I am TAM mom and TAM, and I'm also a PhD student. So I love being here, and I'm so glad I can talk to all of you guys as well. I'm going to go ahead and get started because there's a lot here, and I want to make sure we get through everything, and then you have time to ask questions. All right, and we're progressing, but we're not. Okay. So when we talk about personal dress, there's some things I want to kind of ground us on first. First is what are those things you need to consider when you start thinking about how you're going to dress? I'm going to kind of lean this more towards that business side since you guys are in Business Week, but I'll also give you some other tips for kind of an everyday perspective. But when you're thinking about dressing for business, whether that be an interview or a workplace, they're kind of the same things that you would consider when you're doing your research. The first is what is appropriate to wear in the environment. So you will have done your research on the type of company, the culture, the size of it. Really importantly, what type of business is it? Is it client-based? Or is it, an integrated workplace where you're working together without seeing people who are potential clients? Because obviously you'll want to dress differently if you're representing the company to a client. You also want to take in consideration your role. I always use the classic example of when we see a doctor, we want to see the doctor in a white coat. That's what's appropriate, and it kind of gives us that, whether we think about it or not, it leans to the credibility of his position. The same is true for all of us. How we dress brings credibility. It also brings confidence into the workplace, as well as it makes us feel good. So what are your expectations for yourself and for your coworkers? And for your boss, obviously. Then think about your itinerary. So this is especially important if you're doing an interview. Are you on site 8 hours a day for a day, multiple interviews, and then having to walk a lot of places? Or are you outside? Or are you inside? So think about those things also when you decide what to wear. I'm going to mute. Okay. Again, this should be common sense because you did it already to prepare for your interview, or you will be doing it. But there's something I want to clarify. When we say dress, a lot of people may think it's the physical dress, but it's actually a whole lot more than that. Dress is a powerful communicator. And what that means is that we send messages that we intend to and a lot that we don't intend to based on our presence. So the main topic of this presentation was professional presence, which does have to do with specific garments, but the dress is your whole appearance, okay? So there's two types of things that you can think about. One is modifications. These are the things that actually modify your body, okay? These are things like tattoos, piercings, your hair color. We'll get more into cosmetics and scents. Then you have what's called supplements. And so when you came to this presentation, you were probably thinking that we were going to talk mostly about supplements. That's the garments, the things we put on, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about both, but yes, I'm going to focus a lot more on those supplements, those things that we change frequently and that really identify us, whether we are intending it to or not, okay? So how do we get to this point of perception of dress? Where does it come from? Well, it is completely socially constructed. And so it depends on where your place is from, culturally, identity, family lifestyle, all that from yourself, but also those people who are perceiving you based on your presence. They're coming from a place that they've learned through cultural values, through their own personal interactions, for their perceptions of other socially constructed concepts. So you're not going to know entirely where everyone else is coming from, but being aware of how your presence may be perceived is just something that generally can help you potentially even prepare better for the workplace. Okay. Oh, I forgot the good part about this though. And we were just talking about this, Julia. So this is where I love talking about this. I can't believe I forgot about it. So this is where color becomes important too. It's part of that whole social construction, but color is also a perception from your brain as it perceives it, whether you intend it to or not, from either side. Okay. So let me give you an example. So when we look at blue, and this is from scientific research as well as from qualitative research from HR hirers and influencers, when we talk about blue, our brain perceives that as trustworthy. That means we're honest, we're credible. It's a great color to always default to, okay? When we talk about black, internally, or our brain perceives that as powerful. I mean, I think we can kind of all associate that, right? The power suit always seems to be black, right? And then we think about gray. Gray, our mind perceives that as logical, as analytical. So if you are interviewing for an analyst position, gray is a great color to automatically get a perception from that person that you really have that analytical ability. Again, it's not something that maybe you intended to actually say, I'm wearing gray because I want everybody to think I was analytical today, but the brain is perceiving it like that. And then we have white. White is clean. You can just associate it with that cleanness. But what that also means, it means it's also giving the perception of being organized, time management, work ethic, detail oriented. Okay. But then there's colors that we want to avoid. So one of those colors is orange. I actually do have an affinity towards orange. I really like it. So, and some people, that's their favorite color. But however, our brain sees orange as being unprofessional, typically, maybe even lack of detail, okay? Then we have brown, which Ms. Priscilla and I just talked about. So we have brown. Now, I personally, the word brown kind of makes you drop your tone of your voice. In addition, our brain will say that person may be boring. They may have inflexibility to change. The same also can be hijacked with multicolors. When multicolors, our brain sees multicolors, we read them different ways. So in some cases, our brain might say that person's unorganized because there's a lot of colors going around. But this is also where you get into not being distracting. So multicolors in a business or in an interview situation, it can be distracting for the other person. And you want nothing to distract anyone from what you want to say. Okay, that distraction is actually part of that perception. All right, and you're going to hear me say distraction a lot. Then we talk about red. Now, I don't say avoid red totally, but what I do say is be mindful of it. And what that means is that red is a great accent color. So if you had a red tie, you had some red accessories, that's one thing, but red is really perceived by our mind as being aggressive, right? Sometimes domineering, rebellious. The other thing that this leads to too is that not only is it our brain perception, it's the cultural perceptions. Cultural values are also associated with colors. I don't get into that a lot here because that would be another whole hour. But think, for example, the color white in an Asian culture is actually used for funeral, for more of a celebration of the end of life. So if you're in a interview and you're wearing an all white suit, that may not be the perception you want to give someone. They're coming from it from their cultural beliefs. The same with red in China. Purple, believe it or not, has some very distinctive meanings depending on the culture. So if you really are interested in expanding to an international workplace or are in an international business, you're going to want to really do that part of the research too, to make sure that you are being authentic to that culture's perceptions as well. All right. So then we talk about the first impression. Some of you guys may have heard this a little bit. There's a research out that I'm going to quote here from, I think it was from Career Builder actually, but 50% of hiring managers and recruiters can decide within 90 seconds of meeting someone if that person will be hired for the job, strictly off the first impression. And 90 seconds actually might seem, I mean, if we count 90 seconds, it seems kind of long, but think about this statistic. 50% of interviewers say that they can tell if a candidate is going to be eliminated just by how they walk in a room. That's like 5 seconds. And that's the same as if you turn on your camera and say hello on a virtual platform. It's that first impression. They have no other way to judge you except what they see at the very beginning. So grounding yourself before you enter a virtual platform, before you enter a room, smiling and not being hurried, in other words, showing up early, that all kind of lends yourself to a feeling of confidence and of calmness, and will get that first impression that will be much more positive. Okay, so really keep in mind what your verbal and nonverbal cues are in that first impression, because it's hard to get over a first impression, especially in the given that time, that period that you're interviewing. This isn't just for hiring people, it's also for people who are employed and are interacting with other people in the workplace. So this is where that perception of dress is across multiple avenues, so to speak. What you wear is how people perceive your confidence, of your work ethic, professionalism, even how trustworthy you are. 86% of employees in this research said they actually think a physical appearance does matter in the workplace. Right or wrong, we can't argue with how we perceive things, okay? The other thing that these employees were mentioning, about 90% of them, they actually say that appearance affects how they perceive someone's confidence, but also how they feel confident in their role. So this is a two-way street. This isn't just how someone is seeing you, how you're selling yourself, but it's also how you feel, okay? And we always want to feel our most confident in these circumstances, correct? Okay. All right. So let's get to the nitty-gritty here then. What is professional dress? And I will even change this as what is professional presence, okay? So this is another caveat too. You are in a time and place now that is completely ambiguous. It's like there is no right or wrong. Back in the day, companies could have dress codes. Now they're really not mandated dress codes. As you can imagine, it's not inclusive practices. So there's a lot of ways that things can be interpreted by a lot of different people. There's not one right or wrong way. This is where your research, where your identity, how you feel comfortable, that is all comes in here. So you have a lot more to think about than back in the day when I was very first interviewing and I knew I had to wear a skirt and I knew I had to wear nylons. So I apologize for that, but I think that's also a good thing. You guys don't have to be uncomfortable necessarily that much like that. But you're also able to choose your environments much more than we thought about earlier. So I just want to show this visually, just to kind of give you an idea. Again, I'm going to go for a more global kind of covering this topic. This can change, and I'm open to questions after we're done here. So you're going to see under the business casual, one of the big things here is they're separates. By separates, I mean they're not one suit. They're not matching. In this case, too, that potentially could even be gray jeans or chinos. So it's not a formal dress pant. You've got, there's no tie. It still is really kind of a business kind of persona, but this is not what's considered business professional. I will say that business casual right now is the biggest thing that can be interpreted by multiple things. No, thank you. Sorry, just kind of. So then you look at business professional, this you can see hopefully the difference. Things are much more matched. That's one whole suit, light colored. It's also ironed. Look at the difference between more of the gathering on the jeans or the slacks in business casual than in business professional. Again, this is more just an illustration. I'm going to go into more detail in the next few slides. So I'm going to talk about different types of dress. Okay, we'll start with casual and then we'll get into business casual. Then I'll talk about professional dress as well. Doing different levels here because I want to show the breadth of that decision making that unfortunately you have, but also kind of give you an idea of what you can do to help make that decision. This is an example of dress casual. One thing I want to tell you, if you wear it to the gym, if you wear it to a nightclub, or if you wear it to bed, that is not work clothes. That is casual and is not appropriate for the workplace, pretty much no matter where you work, okay? So when we look at these images, if we look at the gentleman with the really cool Oxfords, I do love those Oxfords, but he's got a hoodie on, his shirt tail is out, and he has a jean jacket. This in some workplaces may be appropriate, but you're never going to know if this is appropriate on the day that you are interviewing. And I would even say on the first week that you're in the job. So this would not be something that you would want to wear for an interview or the first week in a workplace. The girl next to him, off the shoulder, completely non-negotiable. Do not wear off the shoulder in any circumstances. You also want to give a presence of professionalism, no matter how you dress. And this is not really lending itself to that. And then you look at the woman in the Nike Air sweatshirt. Again, it's streetwear, but it's also stuff that you would wear like potentially to work out. This might be appropriate if you know and have been in the workplace, especially if you've already established your work credibility and work ethic. This would not be an interview or first time in the workplace kind of a dress. And then the woman in the overall, acid wash, torn in the jeans, just not appropriate for a professional workplace. So hopefully these are obvious. Okay, we can all see ourselves wearing these on campus or at Starbucks. This is what we call business casual. Okay, so here what I want to show you is that there's more, they're separate, but there is a sense of they go together. They do provide the professional presence. Hair is groomed. There's really no open toe shoes, which is another kind of caveat. Open toe shoes, sandals really aren't considered business casual. I'm going to show you how that transitions into a workplace. You can see the gentleman who's in the sitting position. He's got a tie on. He's got a sweater on. He's actually, I think, wearing dark jeans. That might not be considered professional in some organizations, but it is becoming more acceptable. What makes this business casual is his shirt with his tie. Okay. This is a lot up to interpretation. But then we go smart business casual. This is probably more on trend, honestly. It's definitely more on trend. It's a little bit more able to be adapted to an environment, like say, for example, if you're in a hot climate versus a cold climate. But when you look at the woman in the jean jacket, this makes this smart casual because while she is wearing a skirt, a somewhat matching separate blouse, she's got heels on, she isn't wearing nylons, she's bare-legged, and she's wearing that jean jacket. Now, this is a cool look for depending on the workplace, but this is not considered straight business casual. The next picture, that t-shirt, and actually I would even say the accessories, the chain kind of leans that to being more trend forward or smart casual, okay? And I think you can see that the woman on the far end that's wearing the sandals, that's what I'm talking about. When you get to mean that sandals, high heels, crops, pants, so that you can see, you know, more legs, those tend to lend themselves to being more trend forward and smart business casual. Now, caveat here, the gentleman with the unbuttoned shirt, I don't know that that would ever be appropriate. So I kind of use this is because we think he looks maybe smart, trendy. However, that's distracting and probably not appropriate for a workplace, especially if you're an entry-level employee. So keep in mind your neckline and accessories, things like that. Okay. And I'll go into the accessory thing in a little bit. So this is, hopefully we can see it's business professional. These are matching pieces, usually suits or a dress with a jacket, can be a skirt with a jacket. They're more neutral colors, usually darker colors as well. And one thing that I will talk about is when you start talking about colors, I mentioned gray, and gray is a great example. Gray, maybe your favorite color. You may know now that you want to seem analytical. Some of these colors, the reason dark really works well is you will perspire, especially in an interview. I mean, you could be the coolest cucumber, but there is such a thing as nervous perspiration. In a gray suit or a light blue or anything else that would show that perspiration, number one, you're going to lose your confidence. You're going to feel, you're going to know that that's happening, but that's distracting for the person that you're talking to as well. They're probably not making a judgment, but you're probably thinking they are. So that's why you'll see more business professional in darker colors. They're a lot more forgiving. They actually will go well with a lot more complexions. And it just kind of brings you that confidence. Okay. So we had smart business casual. Now we have smart business professional. This is kind of the same things. These are things that are not really casual, but they don't pull themselves really to those solid, more conservative looks. The woman with the crutches, she looks really nice. The dress is trend forward. Here, though, there are people who will see these stripes, which if you notice are not matching. We'll also see that scarf, which is contrasting to the dress, the stripes on the dress. They will see that and make some kind of perception, like it doesn't match. Like we think it's trend worthy or trend forward. But honestly, if my mom saw that, she'd be like, why don't her stripes match? And that striped scarf doesn't match. So it can hijack, especially within a interview, okay? Can be distracting. The gentleman in the light blue suit, very chic, very trendy. However, you must know your environment in order for this to come across as professional. I would definitely do not recommend wearing light color like this. He's also not wearing a tie for your interview or your first day on the job. And I talked a little bit about when you get to crops, that this woman on the far end, she's got her separates, still seems somewhat conservative, but would be considered more trend forward for a professional dress. Okay, so said all that, that can be really confusing if you are interviewing or if you do not know your workplace at all. This is where you should default to. This is classic business professional. Now I say that, I would say the woman of Asian descent that's wearing the open-toed shoes, fourth one over, that might be considered business casual. But in general, these would be much more acceptable if you do not know your circumstances, okay? The other thing that this does is this is a conservative, solid look so that when you're in an interview, there's nothing to distract the interviewer from what you are saying, okay? There is no oversized jewelry. There is no bright colors. There's nothing for them to look at besides paying attention to what you say. All right. So remember that when you're going into an interview is you want what you're wearing to not take center stage. That's your position. Okay. All right, where are we on time? Okay, I'll go ahead and go through and then we can take questions at the end. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the specifics, not just how the things come together and what kind of looks may work, but also some of those other things that go behind that. Your clothing care, for example. Obviously, you are going to feel your best if you are in a clean, pressed, no wrinkles interview look, as well as when you're in the workplace, okay? This means also fit. And this is when I say, if you have not, or this is where I would recommend getting fitted at a retailer for that those investment pieces will pan out. Number one, when I talk about investment pieces, I talk about those traditional blazers, the suits, those dresses, skirts that will never go out of style, that you will wear forever. That's when those are the things you should be investing money into, and they should fit well. Not only are you going to feel great because you have this thing that has been fitted to you, but also you're giving the impression of being very professional and credible. Nothing's too tight, nothing's pulling when you're sitting, nothing's baggy when you stand up. You're confident and you just know you look great, okay? Also keep in mind when I talk about that distracting is the jewelry, your footwear, and even just the sense that you might have in your personal presence. Modest jewelry can really be great for doing that accessorizing, kind of upping the game. However, and I always use myself as an example, I'm a fidgeter. Today, I purposely did not wear my scarf that I like to wear or my long jewelry. I like to wear bangles. I am a fidgeter and I know I will fidget with them. That is completely distracting for the people that I'm talking to. The same with the people is if they're so enamored by your amazing earrings or that gorgeous brooch that you have on your lapel, then it's distracting again from you taking center stage. You're great because it's beautiful, but they're still distracted, okay? Appropriate footwear, I would say just talking about your comfort is probably primary here. Again, if you know you have to walk around and you cannot confidently walk in heels, do not wear heels. The other thing too is when your feet are comfortable, you're confident and you're not worried about that. Whether you think it or not, there is something about your body language that will tell someone else if you are uncomfortable. Okay, so here gets to the good part. That all stuff was really great, but the physical appearance. This is where we could really get into some controversial debates. But again, I'm giving you the generalization of an impression for the first time in an interview or in a job. Hair, facial hair, nails, tattoos, all go into your presence, right? Overall, this is where you have to decide what's important to you personally, okay? So for example, if you have tattoos, as do most of, I guess I shouldn't say most of us, I do, but if you have tattoos and you are interviewing for a company that potentially does not value that expression or that part of your identity, then you need to know that ahead of time. That's where your research comes in. And how do we do that research? Number one, we go on the website. This can also be true for hair and facial hair. So if you go on a website of the company that you really want to get your dream job or have contacted you saying we'd be interested in interviewing you, but you see no one on any of the pictures on anything on the website that has facial hair, that potentially show tattoos or any of that, you're going to want to make sure you're aware of that, okay? Also, there are some businesses that will have some types of dress guidelines. Look for that as well. There are companies that will come out and say, no visible facial piercings, no visible, tattoos. That is a reality. And I think we all are aware of that. But again, if that is very important to you and that's your part of your identity, this is your chance. You're not just interviewing for them. You're also interviewing the company, because you need to fit what in a place where you are valued and that you have that connection to. So I don't say no tattoos. I don't say any piercings. I don't say no facial hair, but it's up to you to do that homework. Okay. And then groomed nails, it's a distraction thing again, because number one, if your nails are dirty, that's like a whole nother story. But I even know that when I'm on a meeting with students and somebody has the most amazing coffin shaped nails in the coolest color, I'm distracted by that because I think it's so cool that I'm not potentially paying it 100% attention. Same with an interview process. Also, you might have chipped them that day. So just be conscious of everything, the whole presence of how that potentially could affect your perception or someone's perception of you. Then we get into cosmetics and fragrances. Believe it or not, we all have a distinctive fragrance. That can come from our body wash, our deodorants, our shampoo and conditioner, any other hair supplies, our cosmetics, our lotions. And then, of course, any aftershave, cologne, perfume, all of that is part of your presence. It's becoming more, I guess, people are being more vocal now about their intolerance or their sensitivity to scents. So I would be very aware of what your scent is and how you might need to either dial that back potentially in a situation. So if your favorite perfume, this might be the time where you don't do that favorite perfume, because it provides a perception, because we all have a different sense. We all read those scents differently, but also it could potentially be a sensitive issue for someone who is intolerant of that kind of smell and those scents. So I say always default to deodorant, clean deodorant. Okay. All right, let's see where we are. So we finished with talking about kind of that persona, especially if you're in a one-on-one situation. Okay. This is virtual presence. Okay. Probably 95% of you, if you haven't already, are going to do your first probably several interviews in a virtual platform. That's either the demise or the best thing about Zoom. I'm not sure, but because we can Zoom, we're doing a lot more of these. Okay. So a lot of the same things go, but there are things that are different. Some of the keys to your virtual presence, and I will honestly say, this is great for you as a student and for me as an instructor, for anyone who is in a virtual platform, to be aware of these things. Okay. One of the things that I talk about here too is now that we can do remote and we can work at home a lot more, jobs are even doing the hybrid and the remote situations. Don't think of it from working from home. Think of it as coming into a meeting that happens to be based in your home. Your home is your professional place. It's not, I'm going home and I'm going to work. That kind of changes our mindset a little bit, because if we're home and we're doing work, we could also put in a load of laundry, play with the dog, eat cereal while we're on our meeting, and lay in bed. But if we're going to a meeting that happens to be at home, then we're in a professional presence. Okay. Turn on your camera. I would have insisted on it during this, but we have quite a few people on this call. But turn on your camera. It is a part of the first impression, especially if you're meeting new bosses or new coworkers for the first time within a virtual meeting. Look into your camera, especially when you're addressing and you're talking to people. I find this really hard to do because it feels like I'm not seeing anyone, but it is important, and we do feel more engaged when we see someone looking directly into the camera. Watch your frame. So you'll see with my frame that I'm kind of in that middle third, not too much above me, not too much below me, kind of just sitting in that middle. Okay. It's just the way our minds think. It's kind of a symmetrical thing. Okay. Watch your hand gestures, your posture. I tend to do this a lot. So I find myself going, oh, Nope, don't do that. Especially if you're in an interview, you want to, or any place where you want to have credibility, you want someone to listen to you. You're trying to sell someone on your idea. Make sure that you're up straight, not hunched, looking directly to the camera. And when you speak with your hands, make sure you're aware that you're speaking with your hands, because your hands do show. Speak with confidence, limit distractions in an interview. And I've seen this. Make sure everyone in your living space understands that they cannot walk through a room. The dog, the cat, the rabbit is in a room. They only have to be there for 30 minutes so that they're not distracting you. Make sure that there's no distractions, because especially in an interview, that's the time where everyone's expecting everyone to be on their best behavior. Okay. And also be present. Make sure that your face is open, that you're smiling, you're engaged. You're not looking down, you don't roll your eyes. Be just much more aware of your nonverbal cues in the situation, because remember, someone's only seeing your face. They're not seeing the rest of you. They're not really engaging in a conversation with you in person. So it's much more important. Now, the same thing kind of goes. Garment fit and style is important. Accessories, hair, facial hair, makeup. The reason that you want to make sure on these as well is because we might not think about it, but you still will be part of your posture when someone looks at your clothes. So if they are oversized or too tight, that's still coming across. Okay. Yes, you could potentially wear still your boxers or your pajamas. We have all seen the commercials though, where the camera drops and someone sees that. I actually feel more confident if I'm dressed head to toe in that situation. Accessories, not only can they be distracting in the conversation, but the noise. So the clanging of bangles, the clicking of playing with your earring, or even whatever that will be, also comes up on the audio. And then hair, facial hair, makeup, again, just look well-groomed. So coming out of bed with a scrunchie on the top of your head, absolutely no makeup for an interview or potentially even a meeting is not really building your credibility, nor is it making a good impression for work ethic or attention to detail. All of those things are things that you want someone to believe in you for. Now, makeup. In this video, which I don't show in the shorter one, I do have a video where the gentleman really talks about not just what makeup does for a feminine appearance, but also for anyone to even out tones when you're on a virtual platform. The reason is because every camera is different. I'm using a different camera right now that is not nearly as sharp. Some people have amazing cameras that pick up every single little detail. So making sure that you've smoothed that complexion is another thing that you might think about. Again, the quality of the camera is more at play here than you realize, which is why I talk about lighting and color again. So lighting, you can see I'm front lit here, right? I actually turned off all the lights in my office because they are all much higher and they will show too much on my hair. The reason I do that is because I have white hair. So it's like kind of, also I have to watch filters because of the contrast of my hair, sometimes it looks like I have no hair. It's not a good look for me. Other people look great that way, but I just know that, right? I also know that you can see my face. There's so many things now with the Ring cameras, just being aware of that. And I'm going to show you some examples of what not to do, which a lot of you probably are doing right this very second. So the most important thing in clothing on the camera, in the clothing part, is your color, okay? So the worst colors, black and white, because when you wear black and white together, it's a contrast. So again, the camera quality may not read that very distinctly. So when you move, it also is distorted. Also, black and white on a camera is not great for your complexion, for anyone's complexion, especially if you're not a fan of, a foundation or any kind of, evening up of your complexion. Best colors, blue. Normally, I always default to blue. My favorite blue sweater is actually not clean right now, so I did not wear that. Burgundy is my second favorite color. I feel very confident in burgundy, but blue would always get you the best results. Gray, Again, be aware that you may perspire. You can still see perspiration on a Zoom call. Also khaki, it's a little warmer color. Deep shades of purple, burgundy, green, even off-white. And off-white versus white, because off-white has that more warm feeling to it, it also complements almost all complexions. That's the other thing to keep in mind, because it's the camera that really can affect that perception. Okay. So little quiz. So we have different options here. So this is what not to do. And you guys tell me, you can do it via the chat. In A, what's going on here that we're not supposed to be doing? And I'm waiting for the chat. Looking in A, what are some of the things? Bad body language, exactly. Too casual. What does her face say, right? She's like saying, I don't believe you. You know, I'm not listening to you anymore. Okay, what about the background? I mean, granted, she's got a pretty clean kitchen. Mine doesn't look like that. There is a pan on the stove though. It's distracting. It's not professional, right? Then what about B? This is what a lot of you do. And I found out you do it on purpose because you do not want us to see that your hair's messy or whatever it would be. Definitely the lighting. He's got great position. He is perfectly where you need to be aligned in the frame, but you can't see his face. So yes, this is backlighting. All right, C, what's going on there? Looks like she's exactly. Now, by looking at her background, what is our impression of her? Yep, unorganized, exactly. No attention to detail. I'm thinking time management might be a problem, maybe prioritization. I would even say work ethic, you know? And then, so this is a little trickier one. What's going on that would be troublesome in D? Headphones are good. I wouldn't say headphones are a problem because sometimes they're just necessary. Exactly. That laptop is going to fall, right? If she sneezes, laughs, jumps up, she is going to fall. That computer is going to fall off of there. So also look at her clothing. So she does have a more casual shirt on. Its color's okay, but it's a little tight across the chest. So it can be viewed as not so professional. Now, granted, maybe she's talking to her grandkids, but I would even say that there's an accident waiting to happen on this one. Good job. All right, I'm going to take this down here. Hello. Okay. So on the other side, these would be great examples. If you look at the woman in the red, now this, remember when I said red could be considered very domineering or rebellious. In this case, you can't see all red, but it's also her body language. Her face is so open and friendly that we're not potentially thinking that she's out to get us. Also, the background, very neutral. And I would even say it may be a filter, but it's nice and it's warm, very clean. It's still appropriate, whether you're in a meeting or you're meeting your friends on, happy hour, Zoom happy hour. The gentleman in the polo with the brick wall, that brick wall is like my favorite. I tried to use it, doesn't work for me, but I love that brick wall. Great tones, right? And it kind of would work for a lot of things, but his face is he's like so friendly. He's looking directly in the camera. Again, both of these positions are really good from a framing perspective. And then if you look at the woman, the next picture, she is fully engaged. Her hands are being used. Her eyes, her whole face is open, and she's just really present, right? That color is fantastic on her too, with that burgundy. So you can kind of see here, these are things that you can play around with. In fact, I did, before I got on here, was playing around with mine. I'm using a different computer right now with a really not so great quality of a camera. but I did move it around to see what was the best position. And this is absolutely what you should do before you go into an interview or any other thing potentially for Zoom. Okay. So here's where we get to, what time are we at now? Okay, we're closing in. I do have things in here, and I'm going to go really quickly that give examples of where you can find some of these clothes. I get this question a lot. Okay. So for the first slide here, this is if you really don't like going in and trying on clothes. Maybe you're looking for a more gender neutral opportunity or an option. These are always all gender neutral or adaptive. In fact, there's an adaptive website here. These are all websites that have more of a gender neutral. These all have different varying price ranges. When I put $3, if anyone's ever familiar with Kern & Fitch, this would be a great place to do that investment. But they do run on the high side. So like $500–700 for the full suit. The other thing to note here, these are all inclusive sizing, meaning you've got Dapper Boy goes from XX small, all the way to 4XL. So this really caters to much more inclusive options. Some of them more casual. Dapper Boys tends to be more business casual, but some also in professional. Now for a curvier, also maybe a need for a more inclusive sizing on a feminine look, then these are also places. Torrid is actually online, but also in the mall. These both have a wider range of sizes, but also have the styling that's appropriate for this body type. The Loft is a great place for business casual, especially smart business casual, and it has inclusive sizing. The difference too being is that they also offer petite as well as tall, which if you're either one of those body types, you understand that your proportions are different. It's not just a size thing, it's a proportion. Now I put Dillard's and Men's Warehouse for a classic investment piece. These are great options because you can get alterations at both of these places. They also offer a lot of different options at a lot of different places or prices. And so you can really invest or actually just make it to your budget that you can. Now, if you're not ready to invest, rental is highly recommended. So we have Rent the Runway, which is primarily for feminine looks, still more size inclusive from 0 to 22. But Mr. and Mrs. Collection is another rental website that does gender neutral. You can also do Stitch Fix and Nordstrom Trunk Club. I know from firsthand experience, my daughter's fiance, he's just a larger person, 6 foot, I think 6'7", like 300 pounds. He has found some really great dress clothes on Stitch Fix. And they're pretty reasonable prices as well. Then if it comes to it, I'm not saying no to H&M. What I'm saying is do not buy H&M for professional wear unless you have tried it on, because it is lower quality. That's why it's less expensive. So stripes may not match, the way it hangs on you may not make a professional presence, but on the other hand, it could work great. You just need to try it on because you're getting what you paid for here, okay? All right, so there's some community resources. I'm running out of time, but for those who are interested in more of a personalized identity service, the clothing closet at the Center Project, it's available here. Also, Truman's Closet does have professional clothing. It is located by the by Tiger Pantry in level 1 of the Hit Street parking structure. And that is a service where you can go and pick out things for an interview. They also have cap and gowns as well as some cords. And obviously thrift stores, Goodwill, resale shops are fantastic places now to get, especially business casual. But I do know, actually I have talked to a TAM major who is building her wardrobe for New York, for Macy's actually as a buyer, and she's been able to do it out of thrift stores. So my name is Nicolette Leiby. This is my information. I am open now if there's questions in the chat. I know we're running out of time. I appreciate everyone attending, and feel free to reach out if you have any direct questions that you may or may not feel comfortable sharing in the chat, okay?
Thank you, Nicolette. That was wonderful. I'm wondering if you all could put in the chat maybe your favorite takeaway from this presentation. Maybe it was something about color, or I know the shopping tips on where to get different sizes has been really popular in the past. So what did you most enjoy about this presentation? The falling laptop, maybe speaking from personal experience there, I wonder. Yeah, so I hope that you all really enjoyed this. I know this is the second time I've heard it, and I have new takeaways this time from the last time. And we did record it, so we'll be able to share this again as an on-demand event. So you'll have access to the slides and to the content later on. I'm going to stop recording, and then I'm going to share the QR code.